Well, we're here in Kansas City, Missouri, and we're visiting with Tommy Milner, who is the retired CEO and president of Cabela's. And the reason that we're here today is because, Tommy, I wanted to get a little background information on you. And I also want to, so that people understand how it is that you came to know the WolfHounds, and what stimulated you or what caused you to have any interest in us at all, and why you would commit your support, both financially and otherwise, to what we're trying to do as far as an organization. So I think to begin with, I'd like to ask you, where were you born and raised? What was...
I was born and raised in Newport News, Virginia,
Okay.
which is in the Hampton Roads area. Grew up in a military family, surrounded by every major Navy, Army, CIA, Coast Guard, Navy SEAL base you can imagine in the greater Hampton Roads area.
Mm-hmm. And then after graduating from high school, did you go to college then in that same area?
I did. I went to college just outside of Richmond, Virginia. It's a small liberal arts college called Randolph-Macon
Okay.
College.
And what was your goal at that time in life? What did you see yourself as doing?
I liked girls a lot then, but I knew there was no future in it, John. So my major...
Well, you and I have a lot in common.
Yeah, we do. Of course we do. My major was in... I'm a classics major with a minor in philosophy and religious studies. So I studied ancient Greek and Hebrew, and I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to teach language at the graduate level. I won a fellowship to go to the Harvard Divinity School, but they wanted me to sign a commitment to be a minister. And I didn't have a calling for the ministry.
Okay.
I had a calling for teaching. So a month before graduation, my life kind of came down on top of me because I had a degree that didn't qualify me to teach kindergarten. So I went back home for a year just to get a job. Went to work for a bank, and my career kind of started from there.
So I know the rest of the story. I mean, I know when I met you, Tommy, you were the CEO of Cabela's. And so I'm trying in my mind to figure out, from going from a divinity student, and all of a sudden you're running a huge multi-million-dollar corporation. Give me just a little bit of an idea how you got to that point. What were the career, or what were the jobs that you had leading up to that?
Well, the first job was at the bank, and I quickly realized that banks don't pay. And I thought, gosh...
But they do give you a nameplate.
Oh, I had a title and everything.
Okay.
Was fantastic. But titles don't pay bills. And I think this was in 1977. I was making $600 a month.
Oh my gosh.
So almost every month, with 3 days to go at the end of the month, I was out of money, and you just hope you had enough groceries. And well, my next door neighbor, who was also a customer of mine at the bank, so I was making $7,000 a year. He was making $13,000 a year. I was his banker, so I knew. And I remember thinking, if I could make $13,000 a year, I'd be set for the rest of my life. I wouldn't need another penny.
Sure.
It would be. And he was a furniture rep, so he was a road rep for Broyhill Furniture.
Okay.
And one thing led to another, and I didn't know a nightstand from a headboard. And he said, look, you can do it. So he got me an interview. And so I went to North Carolina, interviewed with Broyhill Furniture, which was an iconic brand at the time. And darn if they didn't offer me a job. I had never been west of Richmond, Virginia. I grew up in a poor family. First person on my mother's side of the family to go to college.
Wow.
And so they put me on an airplane, and I go to Denver, Colorado. And I've got a bag and a lot of enthusiasm, and I learned my trade. And that turned into a high-paying commission job with Thomasville Furniture, And in the
Which, by the way, is a great brand.
a terrific brand.
Yeah.
And one day, I was calling on one of my customers, and I thought, if I have to do this the rest of my life, it pays great,
Mm-hmm.
but there's no intellectual challenge to it. Went home, called the president of Thomasville. I was making more money than he was. And I said, Fred, I want to learn how to run a business. So he said, well, let me see what I can put together. You know you're going to take a 90% pay cut. I said, I don't care. It's not about the money. I want to learn how to run something. So a couple of months later, moved back to North Carolina, and I became the assistant product manager of nothing and just started learning. And within a couple of years, I was running a $100 million division of the company in my early 30s.
Wow.
And I've never had a business class in my life.
Now, I was just going to ask you, usually the career path that you're talking about, you got to have an MBA, right?
No, I've never had a business class.
That's what I'm saying, but
Yeah.
that's usually how it
That's
works.
usually how it goes. And so I'm swimmingly doing great, on a track to be the CEO of Thomasville, probably 10 years later.
Why?
And one night I get a phone call from a man named Martin Dubelier, who, along with Jerry Kohlberg of Kohlberg, Kravis, and Roberts, KKR, the famous private equity buyout firm, Mr. Dubelier called me. I didn't know him, and he said, I want you to come to work for me and own a part of a company. And it's your biggest competitor, so you know him. He told me who it was. And I want you to come over as the VP of marketing, and I'm going to make you rich. And I said, well, I don't have any desire to be rich. I got a great job. And he just kept calling every night. And he said, you're not going to turn me down. You're going to come over here. You're going to own part of this company, because as long as you stay at Thomasville, you're just going to be an employee.
Yep.
And you'll never build any net worth for yourself being an employee. And I finally said yes. So I'm in my early 30s. I did no due diligence on the company. I show up. I've got a brand new wife. The company is so close to bankruptcy, it's not funny. And I've walked away from safety and security in a Fortune 100 company. And it was one of those holy crap moments.
Yes.
And about a year later, they fired the president and the third generation founding chairman, and they make me the CEO of the company, which was like taking the helm of the Titanic after the iceberg strike. And Mr. Dubelier put some money into the company to get us propped up a little bit, and we put a team together and turned the company around, and it became one of the most profitable companies in the furniture business.
Mm-hmm.
And in 1994, we sold the company. And by the grace of God, my partners in New York were buying Remington, the gun company, from DuPont. And I had no interest in staying with the new owners of our furniture company. And they said, do you want to do another deal with us? And by chance, the first thing that my father made me save my own money for when I was 13 years old was a Remington shotgun.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
And to get the chance to run the company was just indescribably unbelievable.
Yeah.
And so I went to Remington, and it was one of the great 15-year stretches of my life. We owned the company. It flourished. It was fun. We had a military component to our business, so we were able to pay back a little bit for the sacrifices that you and millions of other Americans have done. And in 2007, we sold the company, and I stayed for a couple of years with the new owners, and then was offered the chance. I always wanted to know if I was good enough to run a really big public company, and Cabela's was a big public company. At the time, we had 10,000 employees and all the complexities of being a public company. And my wife and I moved to Nebraska.
How did you get that? How did you find that opportunity?
The opportunity found me. A friend from a prior life had been on the Cabela's board, and I was in a Wendy's drive-through, and my phone rang, and it was a guy named Steve Murray. Rest his soul, he passed a couple of years ago, and he said, "Do you want to be the CEO of Cabela's?" And I said, "Steve, that's not even funny. I've never worked 1 minute of my life in retail. I don't know anything about retail. I know the industry, the outdoor industry, but I don't know retail." And he said, they got people that know retail. They need a leader. And I knew how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I went home and told my wife, and she said, "Where is Nebraska?" She's a Georgia girl. "Where is Nebraska?" I said, "Well, it's the state north of Kansas and south of South Dakota." And she said, "I don't know where that is." And a couple of months later, we sold the home we were going to die in North Carolina, and moved to Sidney, Nebraska. And that turned in just to a wonderful 10-year opportunity, and we more than doubled the size of our company and increased our stock price from $8 to, we sold it at $61.50. Incredible run.
Incredible.
Surrounded by just amazing people.
And I might add, almost everywhere I go in my state of Montana, there's a Cabela's, which is quite a
We went from 30 stores to 90 stores during my time there.
Yep.
It was a great run. I've had a wonderful career.
How was it working with the brothers Cabela?
Just a once in a lifetime opportunity. These two guys, together with one of their wives, Mary Cabela, literally started the company on a little round table in a 1,000 square foot home in Chapel, Nebraska, with 4 babies in the house. And Dick just had an idea that turned into a $4 billion public company.
Oh my. Is it true that he started by making flies? Fishing flies, and he was selling fish?
He bought the first group of flies while on a buying trip with his father in Chicago. Wow. His dad was in the furniture business, by coincidence. And he brought the flies back, and he said to Mary, "I think we can sell these through the mail." And he ran an ad in the Casper, Wyoming newspaper where Mary was from. They knew the newspaper. And it said 5 flies for $1. This was in 1961. Shipping and handling for free.
Oh, wow.
And they waited for the orders to come in, and not a single order came in. So Mary said, "Well, you're going to have to tell your dad you bought these flies." And because he spent $25, and $25 in 1961 was, in Chapel, Nebraska, was a whole lot of money. And she said, "Why don't you change the ad? 5 flies free, shipping and handling $1. And they sold every single fly.
Unbelievable.
And from the first customer, a Mrs. Mary Lindstrom, Mrs. Cabela thought, "You know what? This might turn into something. I'm going to keep track of every customer and what they bought." And so from the first customer, on a recipe card, Mary would write, Mrs. Lindstrom, she lived in Casper, Wyoming, she bought 3 woolly booger flies. And that turned into the database that was the crown jewels of our company.
And of course, when I was a younger man, I used to get a Cabela's catalog. So once I got on their list, once I did that, every time the new catalog would come out. Now, it's my understanding that that's how they marketed. It was catalog sales.
It was catalog sales from 1961 until the early 90s when they built their first big store in Sidney.
Yeah, and my recollection is I loved to get the Cabela's catalog because it was a quality catalog.
Yeah.
And it had all this, stuff you dream of having. And now it's in front of you. Now you can actually have it. So I actually started ordering gear like vests, fishing vests and hunting vests. And the quality of the stuff that came to my house was absolutely head and shoulders against anything I could buy in a regular sporting goods store.
And one of their founding values was that if it's not right, we take it back and give you your money back, no questions asked.
Yeah, well, I had nothing but good experiences, and that was back in the early 70s.
The last thing I had to do before that I was offered the job, I had to go to Sydney, and I had to meet Dick and Jim. So we're in a hotel room. Public company CEO searches are sort of secretive, so I sneak in and all this. And Dick was, God bless his soul, he was a salesman. He had a million ideas a second. Just this effusive personality. And Jim, who's alive, says 30 words in a whole day. So we're at dinner, and Jim's just looking at me. So Dick and I are carrying the conversation, and Dick says to me, which it was the question I feared, when was the first time you saw a Cabela's catalog?
Ooh.
And I said, Dick, I could make a story up, but I'm going to tell you the truth. My mother's family were dirt poor farmers in central North Carolina. They didn't have plumbing. They had an outhouse, and they had no electricity in the house. The first time I saw a Cabela's catalog, it was reading material in the shitter behind the house.
I believe that.
And he
along
just
with the Sears,
burst,
along with the Sears catalog.
and it served as sort of toilet paper as well. And Dick Cabela, I thought he was going to fall out of the chair. He said, I bet a lot of our catalogs were used for that purpose.
And, you know, whenever I went into a Cabela store, the first thing that caught my eye were a tremendous amount of mounts. Big mounts, full-size mounts, and so forth. How did Dick get involved, and how did that come about?
Well, Dick went to Africa and shot an elephant in the 1980s, and he had the elephant full body mounted, so you can imagine the size of an elephant. And legend has it that the elephant shows up a couple of years later in this enormous shipping crate in Sydney. And he didn't have a place to put it, so he put it in a warehouse. And he had this vision, what if you had a store that had everything that was in the catalog in an environment where there was a mountain and all the taxidermy that he and Jim and Mary and the people that worked for the company owned. So it became a store museum, and that elephant was the centerpiece of the Sydney store to this day.
Yeah, and I've seen that when we came back there. It's
Yep.
phenomenal. So somewhere along the line, in the years that Cabela's was going, somebody just determined that they would have a Founders Award.
Yes.
Can you just tell us a little background on the Founders?
There was a long tradition in the company that once a year we would award what we call the Founders Award. And that award was reserved for one person in the company, nominated by their peers, and ultimately selected by the CEO, and in that case, when I was there, by me. And it was for the expression of our values by one of our employees that went so far beyond expectations that it should be called out.
Mm-hmm.
And every year we had a national sales meeting where we would bring all of our store people, and you were at one. There were 1,500 people there. And that's when the Founders Award was presented. Mm-hmm. Always, the 10 years I was with the company, every year you would think, well, this story, it can't be topped. And the next year it would get topped.
And, you know, in Owatonna, Minnesota, there's a Cabela's, a nice Cabela's, and it's been there. I understand it's been there. It was one of the
second store.
Yep. And there was a young man working there named Matt Mollenhauer, and his dad happened to be Bob Mollenhauer, Moose, who I served with in Vietnam. Right. And he and I had gone, through hell and back together, and then finally he got so severely wounded that he was sent home. And he was one of the first guys I found when I started looking for the guys that I served with.
Mm-hmm.
And he and I and a couple of other guys decided that a reunion would really be something that might be kind of exciting. So that's how the reunion thing got started. Well, Moose called me on the phone one day, and he said, Matt was asking me if I thought the veterans would have any interest in coming to Minnesota to do a fishing trip,
Mm-hmm.
just the veterans fishing trip. And I kind of thought, well, and Moose is a big fisherman. He lives and eats fishing. And I thought, well, gosh, I don't know. How do you think guys would come to that? And he goes, well, let's just let Matt see if Cabela's would get involved and so forth. And the next thing I know, we're being told that Home Office has said, yeah, what, this sounds like a pretty good idea. Why don't we get some of these old vets in and not only take them fishing, but why don't we bring them into the store? And why don't we, as a store and as the employees, recognize their service?
And you had no idea what was in store for you.
Nothing. And he says, and as a matter of fact, why don't we feed them dinner? Why don't we have the store employees put a dinner on for them and really put the icing on the cake? And Moose is telling me this, and I couldn't wrap my mind around a company actually taking in these old Vietnam vets and not only having them in the store for recognition, but the day before we got there, Cabela's sent 2 of their pro fishermen with all their gear up to Bass Lake, where the fishing trip was going to take place, and they completely outlined the lake. They found out where the fish were. I mean,
Rigged the boats.
they rigged the boats, everything. We didn't even have to have a fishing pole.
No.
We didn't even have, nothing. We didn't have to have anything. So I said, you know what, I said, let's give it a try. Let's see if anybody would come. And so I started putting the word out, and pretty soon I'm getting all these replies, when are we going to go? And so then Matt arranged the date and everything, and we made arrangements at the resort. And some of the backstory that a lot of people don't know is Cabela's not only supplied the fishermen, the boats, the equipment, the store, recognition. And by the way, I can't even tell you what it felt like when they had a red carpet. And
Literally.
They rolled the red
lines.
carpet out, and when we walked in, an American flag, a huge American flag, was flying from the ceiling. Every employee in the store was lined up on each side of us, and as we walked in, they shook our hand, and they said, thank you.
Mm.
Unbelievable. And Matt says, oh, by the way, guys, anything you buy in here today, you're getting at employee pricing to boot,
Mm-hmm.
And so we didn't know they were going to make us dinner. We didn't know that we were going to get a complete tour of the store. And we got in there, and it was overwhelming, I got to tell you. Just the employees alone, being there, it just blew us away. And by the way, I don't even know if you know this, but Cabela's sent Cabela's vans to pick us up.
I know.
And they had the police and the sheriff
Mm-hmm.
with all the lights going to the store, and they pulled up in front of the store. I don't know what the people in the neighborhood thought was going on, but what a great experience. And then after that, then we went up to the lake, and here the Cabela's is waiting for us again. And not only did they do all that, but then when we started to have meals, here's all this Cabela's smokers from the store. And so they go, we're going to demo some of this stuff, and maybe you guys might be interested. If you've never done this before, you might be interested in getting a smoker and doing some of this. So it ended up that you guys, it was just, I can't even describe to you. I think I tried. But I mean, it was phenomenal. So after that trip, we went home, and Moose called me on the phone one day, and he said, you know, that whole fishing trip thing must have impressed somebody. And I said, well, it sure in the hell impressed me. And he goes, no, you don't understand. I think Matt might be getting recognition for putting all this together and having all this thing. And I go, really? And he goes, yeah, not sure. We're not sure, but it kind of a rumor. And I said, well, God bless his heart. He deserves any recognition he would get. Well, that then developed into getting a phone call. And under oath of secrecy, Matt is going to be given the Founders Award. And we would like to have a few of you veterans, if you can, come and be with us in Denver. And it's going to be a surprise.
And remember the fishing contraption that Matt made so that Dick
Glover could fish. It was custom made.
Yeah.
And signed by Jim Cabela.
Yep.
Do you remember that?
Yeah. And Dick had not been able to fish.
Oh, because he only had one hand that he could use. Oh, that was fun. I've got pictures of that. Smile on his face is from ear to ear. And so Dick Glover was there, and Matt was there, and I was there, and Joe Wascom, Big Joe, was there.
Mm-hmm.
And they hit us. And
Matt had no idea.
I don't even know if Matt knew his folks were there.
No, he didn't know.
And so Moose is there, of course. And then, so there's a huge auditorium full of folks, employees. Unbeknownst to me, until this thing gets started, and we're in the wings. And they said, well, there's going to be a point where you're going to get called up on the stage. What? Oh, yeah, you're going up on the stage, and you're going to be part of this ceremony. And I go, okay. And there's a lady there. You're the lady that coordinated that event. And she just was so excited we were there. I mean, she just made us feel like we were something special, you know. And so the time came, and they said, okay, and somebody announced that we have special guests. And they marched us out there, and nobody knows who the Founders Award is yet.
That's right.
I mean, nothing's been said, and we're standing in front of all these people, and, you know, the stage lights are on us, and you look out there, and you see, I don't know how many people were there.
1,500.
1,500 people out there. And forgive me, I can't remember who was emceeing this thing, but were you?
It was me.
Okay, So you said something to the effect of, you know, we're here to honor our veterans, and so forth and so on. And the next thing I know, you said, if you're a veteran out here in the audience, I'd like you to stand up. And I'm telling you, I was absolutely stunned at the number of fellas that stood up.
Mm-hmm.
And you said, and then the music started, and you said, I want every one of you guys out there to get to an aisle, come up here, and I want you to come up on this stage, and I want you to shake their hands. I'm sorry.
And my fear was that the damn stage was going to collapse with all those people.
Buddy. And you know, and these are all vets. I mean, these are guys, some of these guys are combat vets too, you know.
Iraq war vets.
Oh my gosh. You know, and so I just was blown away. I thought, man, this is just beyond anything I would have dreamed. Mm-hmm. And these vets that were coming up, they had tears in their eyes. Then you said, Dick Glover, would you say a few words? And so Dick gets up there in front of the microphone, and of course he broke down right away. And he tried his best. And he said about how we felt and so forth. And I don't think there was a dry eye in the place. And then we were...
I'm trying to MC the thing, crying my eyeballs out.
Wow.
One of the hardest things I ever did.
And of course, we didn't know you from Adam.
No.
I mean, you could have been the janitor for all we knew. And so then we took our seats, and then the Founders Award thing came up. Well, by this time, Matt is sitting down there, and he's seeing his dad and all us guys, and I think he probably is thinking, maybe,
Yeah.
you know. And then you got up, and man, I'll never forget the words that you said about veterans and our service, and I thought, man, there's a guy that has heart for us. And then the award ceremony, and man, I was so proud of him, and it was a co-award with one of his guys in the store. The two of them got the co-award, and then you said at the end, you go, okay, we're going to eat, you know, and all these buffets are out there and so forth, and we're sitting there. Well, I had prepared a plaque for Jim Cabela. And I wanted him to know how much we appreciated what Cabela's had done for us. Well, it just coincidentally, maybe not coincidentally, our table was right next to your guys' table.
Yeah, it was not coincidence.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I didn't know at the time. So we're right next to Jim and you and some of the upper management guys. And I've got my plaque, and I go, well, how am I going to do this? So I thought, well, I'll just go over to the table and present it to him.
Yeah.
And because I didn't know if there was going to be another opportunity. And so I did, and you talk about being quiet, a quiet man. He didn't have, you said 30 words in a day. He looked at me, and I didn't know if I had offended him or whatever, but I'm trying to show him this, and he's looking at it. And I said, this is from us. This is from the guys, you know, to you, just as the smallest token that we could possibly give you. And he took it, and then you said, okay, this is great, but we're going to do something special with this. So if you don't mind, after this deal, we're going to go with Jim, and we're going to go to a room. Remember that?
Yeah.
And we're going to have a one-on-one with you guys and Jim and me, and we're going to, and I have no idea what this guy's got up his sleeve. He has photographers in there. He's got, I mean, it was unbelievable. And Jim, still, his expression, he was so emotional, but didn't say much.
No.
You know, but
It's his way.
he did thank us, and gosh, he got real tender,
Yeah.
very tender-hearted. And of course, you were a ball baby. You just, I still didn't know who you were until you got up there and somebody said, now we're going to have the CEO say a few words or whatever. And it still didn't register with me. And so then we sat back down, and you came up to me at the table, and you said to me, how did you find all these guys? I understand that you found all these veterans. And I said, yes, I did. And you said, I've got a bucket list. And I've got several of them done, but there's a couple I don't. And one of them is to find information about my cousin. And he was a Marine, and he was killed in Vietnam. And he said, and you told me, it's really bothered me all these years. And you said, I had Norman Schwarzkopf on my board of directors at Remington, I believe.
George Jolin, the Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. Mike Hagee, the Commandant of the Marine Corps. Couldn't find any information about how my cousin died.
And so you said, would you try? And I said, all I need you to do is write his name and his KIA date. And I said, I'll do what I can. And so
You actually said to me, if the guys that were with him are alive, I promise you'll talk to him in a short period of time.
that's what I said. And so that was on a Friday. We went home on Saturday. And first thing I did when I got home is I started my little, I called it my magic, how I work my magic. And not only did I find about Sammy and his Vietnam stuff, I found Joe Silvestri. and I'm sorry, I can't remember the other guy's name. I even found his childhood buddy that lived behind him in the house, on the block behind him.
Right.
And so when I called Joe to verify, you know, Joe just broke down. When he found out what I was doing, and I didn't realize at the time until he told me how that whole day played out. And Joe, being the platoon sergeant, was, and I was in that position. I was a platoon sergeant myself, and so I know you're directing men. You're telling them where to go. You're telling them what to do. And sometimes your direction turns out that somebody gets killed. Mm-hmm. And the survivor's guilt, Tommy, that you take home with you and live with the rest of your life is absolutely undefinable.
And Joe wanted to talk to someone in the family.
Anybody.
More than I wanted to talk to
anybody. And he didn't know how. He didn't know who. You know, so forth. And so I talked to Joe Silvestri for over an hour. And at the end I said, now Joe, this is the deal. Sammy's cousin, Tommy Milner, and I didn't even tell him about Cabela's. I said, has contacted me and wanted just, his bucket list is to find information about Sammy. And I said, would you be willing to talk to him? Oh, God, yes. He says, I need to. He says, I need to talk to him. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to give him your number, and vice versa, and I think it'd be real good if you guys would touch base with each other. How many minutes after I hung up the phone did he call?
A half a nanosecond.
And you happened to pick up the phone. I mean, you answered the phone.
Yeah.
And now tell me what that was like.
So I'll back up a little bit first to put some context in this. On December 28th, 1966, I was celebrating my 13th birthday. My parents had a small birthday party with, you know, the kids that you grow up with. And in the middle of the party, the phone rang, and it was my mother's sister-in-law, Sammy's mom, who called to tell my mom that Sammy had been shot in Vietnam and was in the process of being medevaced home. And they were grave injuries, and they didn't think he would survive. So the party, I mean, it's just one of those moments in your life. And it just kind of fell apart. So he didn't die until February 27th of 67. And he was this just good-looking guy. He was several years older than I was, and he was the cousin that told you about beer and boobs and girls and cigarettes and and planking and shooting 22s and stirring up wasps' nest and everything a young boy learns from somebody. Mm-hmm. And when he died, we went to this. My mother grew up in a very tiny town, and there was one Baptist church, and Sammy's funeral was a full Marine funeral. It was the saddest thing I've ever seen in my whole life. And those Marines, they were in their dress blues, and when they played taps at the end, it was unbearable for a 14-year-old kid. And for reasons I still don't understand, I needed to know what happened that day. And for years I thought, what an odd thing to want to know. But I did.
Mm-hmm.
And there would be stretches of time, years, where I would just give up. And then someone would come into my life, like General Schwarzkopf, who was a great friend. And I said, Norm, told him the story. He said, well, let me see what I can find. Well, he couldn't find out anything. And then General Jowen and General Hagee, and so 4 decades, 5 decades
Yeah.
pass. And then, by the grace of God, I meet you, tell you the story, and you made magic happen. So Joe called me, and I grew up in a military family. My dad served in World War II. He was part of the group that liberated the Bataan Death March survivors. He was in the Philippines. His brother was a bombardier in B-24s. Was so claustrophobic when he came home that he could never sleep without the windows and doors open. And it didn't matter if it was 100 degrees or 5 degrees. On my mother's side of the family, all of her brothers served. Her oldest brother, 82nd Airborne, landed in a glider at D-Day, fought in Italy, and was shot in the Battle of the Bulge, and spent 5 days in a foxhole with his dead buddy. And his legs were shattered. And they finally got him, and my mom said when Uncle Dick came home, he went from being the most fun guy you ever met in your life to just a shell of a person, shattered, and never did anything more than pump gas at the local gas station the rest of his life, shattered. His brother was a CB in Iwo Jima, and on and on. And my dad, when he got out of World War II, he was an active duty reservist, so we shopped at the base exchange.
Sure.
And just military has just been a big part of my life. So when I talked to Joe that day, I'm sitting at my desk and we're both just crying. Could hardly talk. But yet, through the tears, Joe described as if he were looking at that field. He described the size of the field, the vegetation, the sounds, the smell. And this place, you know, and your brothers know, it's called Arizona. And more Marines won the Medal of Honor in Arizona than any other place in Vietnam during the war. And it was a place between 2 rivers, the Anhua River, about 30 clicks west of Da Nang. And Joe told me that they were fighting guys in uniforms. They weren't fighting Viet Cong. They were fighting NVA regulars that knew how to fight. And he described the entire scene. And it was just chilling. My cousin had his best friend was a kid named Jimmy Reddington. Jimmy was an orphan from Pennsylvania. And when my cousin was shot, Joe crawled over to him. He was the grenade guy. And they were cut down from the left side of their flank and surprised. It was an ambush. And Joe was calling Sammy for a return of grenade fire at the machine gun pit, and there was no response. So they suppressed the fire. Joe crawls over to Sammy, and he's taken a head wound. And he said, I thought he was dead, and then I noticed he was breathing. So called Doc over, and they got him out. Jimmy Reddington, my cousin's best friend in the platoon, literally went crazy and just lost his mind. So Joe described that, you know, Sammy was medevaced out, and you sort of don't know you lose the guy.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until months later, months after Sammy died in February, that Joe learned that he had died in Charleston in the hospital, never regained consciousness. Well, Sammy's death so upset Jimmy that about 6 weeks later, Jimmy just went crazy in a battle and charged a machine gun nest and was killed.
Mm.
And Joe has had to live with all of this. And he and I talk once a month. And just amazing man. Came back. He was shattered. Tried to find solace in a bottle. Didn't work. And ultimately got redemption and has led a very successful life.
Yeah. You know, that's so common, isn't it?
Mhm.
With combat veterans.
Yeah.
And have him talk to me on some way about his service and so forth and so on. Well, the only story I knew about my grandfather is my mom told me that he was gassed. His unit was mustard gassed. And so many of them were burned up, their lungs were burned up, and when they came home, there was no VA.
Right.
They just said, thank you, and you're now separated, and good luck.
And they suffered.
Oh, so many of them, just the excruciating pain. So, like so many of them, he went in the attic and put a gun in his mouth and blew his brains out.
Yeah.
And this was after he had two little girls, two little daughters, and my grandmother was then a widow. So, you know, I've researched a lot. And I found out that the government actually gave a little severance to widows of fallen soldiers. Well, in order for, and somebody was watching out for him, somebody put in there that he had died an accidental death. If it would have said suicide, they'd have got nothing. But because this person put down accidental death, my grandmother got $250.
Which let her survive.
Which allowed her to survive. And I didn't know any of this. And so when I was younger, if I let my sideburns grow, it would turn red down here. One day I asked my mom, I said, you know, we don't have any redheads in the family. Where's this coming from, Mom? And she goes, oh, well, your grandfather was a redhead. My grandfather.
Wow.
And so the genes, now you can see that there ain't much of anybody's genes left on me, but
Just good looking.
so this is one of the reasons I'm sitting here going, well, what if we could put something together like that and have an actual unit history of our unit. And that's why I'm doing this.
Well, the blessings for me that have come from this are just greater than I can describe. Joe Silvestri and Sammy's brother, Johnny, my other cousin, Sammy's younger brother, when Sammy was killed, Johnny enlisted. He was the last surviving male member of the family, so he didn't have to go.
Yes.
He went and did 2 tours. And now lives in Troy, North Carolina. And he wanted, unbeknownst to me, he wanted to talk to the guys that were with Sammy that day.
Of course. Yes.
And now they talk all the time. Facebook friends. Sammy had 2 younger sisters. They're now grown women. They now talk to Joe. And the love that Joe gets from that family.
Oh, buddy.
It's crazy.
Unmeasurable. And, you know, I keep telling you that this is cascaded out.
It just gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
So, because of your support of us, I've been able to go out and find, this is another project of mine, I've went out and found the families of the guys that got killed with us. And when I find them, you know the first thing they say is, we always wanted to talk to anybody that was with our son, my husband, whatever. Because
It's a rock in a pond.
because when the Army sent us the letter, it said, your so-and-so was killed on this date in this Vietnamese province, and it was written in Vietnamese, which insulted every single person that got that letter, by explosive device, whatever. They had 5 categories that define rifle, gunfire, whatever. That's it.
And see, we thought
Nothing.
that Sammy was shot on Christmas Eve, because the reports that I got, that you helped me get, said wounded December 24th, 1966. It wasn't Christmas Eve. It was the day before. Because of the time change,
Yes,
the
yes,
day change,
Yes.
somebody in the Pentagon wrote the date wrong.
Yeah. So.
And so something as simple as that, Joe, I said, how are you guys out on Christmas? We weren't out on Christmas Eve. It was the day before, during a truce.
And you know, the website that we have has had over 4 million hits.
Wow.
Our little website has had over 4 million hits. Yes, I found the family. And it's because, Tommy, you have allowed us to have the resources. How do I say thank you?
You don't have to.
What do I say?
You don't have to. I owe it to my dad, to Sammy, to his brother, to Joe.
Well, buddy, I hope and I pray that you're as blessed as we are. I hope that
I'm blessed by being part of your life.
I hope
That's
so.
the blessing.
Yeah. So.
God's been so good to me.
Yeah, and me as well.
I've been so fortunate not to give back. Just be.
Doesn't
My
it?
dad would be ashamed of me if I didn't.
You know, and this is just one story.
I know.
We could sit here for today and tomorrow and next week, and I could tell you the impact of your support, what's happening. And thank you for being there for us. Thank you.
My dad would be ashamed of me if I didn't.
What's your definition of a hero? If you could tell me what a hero looks like to you, what's your definition of a hero?
A man that sacrifices for his country without any question. That's a hero. And we're so blessed in this country, those guys that flew those planes in Syria last night, they don't know what they're getting into. Those are heroes. I have a young man. His father and I have been friends for, 40 years. We worked together. And he had this amazing kid. And the kid's name is Zach Walters. And Zach, artistic kid, he could paint and draw, just unbelievable. He went to the South Carolina School of Art and Design, which is the best of the best on the East Coast for kids that are artistically inclined. And he graduated and started a t-shirt company. And he found out the apparel business is really, really tough. So he moved to Las Vegas and he started fighting MMA with Wanderlei Silva, who is sort of a legend in MMA. And Zach told me that one time he fought this Brazilian, and they say the Brazilians have hands of steel. And he said, I realized that my career in MMA was probably not long for this world. So you know what he did? He became a Navy SEAL.
Oh my.
And he is he's the medic and the sniper for SEAL Team 3 today. And I've known this kid since he was this big, and he's just a stud.
Mm-hmm.
He looks like a stud.
Mm-hmm.
He's the calmest, coolest guy you've ever met. And before he went on his last tour, he just got back home. He sent me some stuff. He sent me the battle flag for SEAL Team 3.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife and I have a big front porch. It's a Southern style home, and on one side of the porch we fly an American flag. And I told Zach, you tell your brothers every day you're in theater, that flag's flying
Yes.
in front of our house.
Yes.
Those are heroes.
You know what, Tommy? Thank you. I love you. I love you, brother.
too, man. This is something special. Love you too, man. I just hope that you all know how grateful the country is for what you did, the unselfishness that you displayed, the pain that you've endured, and how much this country appreciates each one of you, and the impact it's had on your families is probably 10 times the impact that your service had on you personally, because the rock in the pond, those ripples just go every direction. So, from me to you, thank you.
Tommy, again, thank you so much for meeting with us and taking time out of your life. And thank you for your support. And you know what? As long, I know what I'm saying is true. As long as you're alive and as long as I'm alive, we're going to continue the good work.
As long as I breathe and you breathe, these guys will never be without support.
Yep. I love you, man.
Love you, brother.
Thank
It's a
you.
real deal.